Okay, let's start.
Where's Ashley's glasses?
This is the Vision Committee meeting, and I know you're all excited about being here and everything. The purpose that I called, it was first canceled, then I said, no, I'd like to have a discussion of everybody. A couple things that do concern me as mayor. One of them is the constant comments that we have that Canyon City is so hard to work with. I'll be very honest and flat about that. And I'd like to have that discussion with all of you, if you are contractors, what do you think it is? The other thing is we're going to have a discussion about moving our building code to 2018. We're 2006 now. I got a letter soon after I became mayor from the insurance guild or whatever that is saying that the insurance costs are going to go up in Canyon City or here because of we're on 2006. The other I was told, may not be true, I don't know, says that we can't certify at 2006. We probably have to move to 2018. Is that true? That's true. So Kathy and this county, we're both on 2006, right?
Yes.
So there's no way to certify our building officials on 2006. So we really have to have that discussion. Now I know builders that do function now in 2016. I believe that we're doing a spec house and I think it's on 2018. It's no big deal. But we need to have that discussion here in Canyon City. Along with that, I really want to have a discussion why you think of what it would be, what we could do to streamline, whatever it is, where you think, especially commercial, would be easier to work with. I guess easier or more streamlined. Those are the two things I'd like to talk about. But first, the exciting thing is, Mr. Lancaster, could you approach the podium here? We put him on the spot. We have an intergovernmental agreement. Our city engineer, Adam, has worked and staff has worked to get a safe schools. Would you explain that? I'm probably not going to do a good job.
Yeah, you bet. So in cooperation with Lincoln School, in 2017, we got a grant for Safe Routes to School to add curb and gutter and sidewalk around Lincoln School there from 4th Street, Myrtle Avenue from 4th Street to 6th Street. And that is in conjunction with the project. We just started the water main project, and we're going to have our 2A street reconstruction also this summer. We're trying to get it all done as much as we can, if not all of it, before school starts again in August. And so we have been waiting ever so patiently for CDOT to finally get us an IGA so we can put things out to bid. That arrived this afternoon, and I didn't want to delay things further, waiting to the May 6th meeting, so I asked the mayor if we could ask for a motion to approve the mayor's signature on the IGA. It's a standard CDOT grant contract like we just approved for Main Street. And then we can get this back to CDOT right away and hopefully get a notice to proceed from them. So.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Any questions of council? Mr. Meisner?
If we're going to have a vote on approving the signature, don't we have to have a special meeting? Well, we can't do that in a committee meeting. It has to be done at a council meeting.
I don't think so.
I mean,
No,
if you consider it an emergency, you could. It wouldn't have to be posted. So it's your definition of whether you think it constitutes an urgency or an emergency, which, in our opinion, it does because of the bidding process that we have to conform to. As you well know, we're going to be under an incredibly tight time frame. So finally, we've been waiting for this notification from CDOT to allow us to bid this section of the 2A projects over by Lincoln School. We've already got the permission from the Canyon City Middle School, so I think it would be imperative so we don't have to wait or have you guys come back tomorrow to do this. So it's all a function of whether you consider it urgent.
Worst case, we could talk to the attorneys and we could just ratify it on May 6th if you want.
Yeah, we could do that too.
We could ratify the emergency signature.
Either way works.
Just as long as we're following protocol.
No, again, you define what constitutes an emergency. There is no.
I mean, we can call a special meeting, emergency meeting now with
Yes.
with 3 members
Yes.
and vote and get it done.
I would like to get to a vote to get this approved.
I would
So-
request a meeting. 3 others? 2 others?
Second.
No?
Motion's been made by Mr. Meisner and second by Ms. Smith that we will call this as a special meeting to approve the IGA for the Lincoln School SRTS, whatever that is.
Safe routes to school.
Safe crossings,
Federal
which
program.
they are very much needed there.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Mr. Meisner?
You called the meeting, right?
I called the meeting. Should we call the roll first?
Yeah.
Why don't you call the roll first before we do anything else?
Councilmember Cochran? Here. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Present.
Councilmember Hamrick? Absent. Councilmember Jaquez? Absent. Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember
Here.
Turner?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Here.
Mayor Troutman?
Here. Okay, then, Mr. Meisner has made the motion to approve, and it's been seconded by Ms. Smith. Any discussion on that motion? And that is the Canyon City Lincoln School SRTS IGA.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to point out that part of the urgency of this is that when we did some road work by Mountain View Chronology School, the way the timing ended up being, because we had some glitches in our bidding process or changes, that it happened during the school year, and it was a real mess for that school. And so I think it's really important that we time this well so it doesn't disrupt the school children. And also point out the reason why we are repairing and reconstructing South 4th Street and Myrtle Avenue is to be in conjunction with this, the new sidewalks going in at Lincoln Elementary School. So it's an efficiency of scale as well.
Okay. Ms. Gonzalez?
So Adam, this can be bid out and ready to start by the end of school,
That's our plan, yes.
and then those can be completed by the time school starts?
That's going to be our goal, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All
So
right.
you,
I hope so.
Water, which is taking place right now, then this project would be the sidewalks and the ramps, and most likely get a different bidder, because this is under federal grant, which is what we call Davis-Bacon,
Right.
where they have to pay prevailing wages. Most contractors do not want to pay prevailing union wages, so you'll probably get someone in a union environment that will come down here, and then as soon as they're done, the road goes in. So it's a really highly coordinated act,
And very, very needed.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Meisner?
I'm going to address this, I guess. The work that we did on Myrtle a couple of months ago, I think it's Myrtle, running in front of the school.
Yes.
There are some parent stormwater, or not stormwater, but ditch water issues that exist there with the elevation changes that happened.
My understanding is those have been addressed with those users, and if not, if we have further tweaks to make, we can do that. The good thing about that is the work under the roadway is done, and so if adjustments need to be made to the irrigation boxes, that could still be done without redoing any work. But I talked to the crews last week, and my understanding from them was they had talked to those users on South 5th and 6th. But if we need to fall back on that, we can do so.
It's my understanding that the installation of those gates is not functioning as they had anticipated.
Okay, we'll check into that.
If that problem's corrected.
Okay, whose dog is that? All right. Any other questions on the motion? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Cochran?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Turner? Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Aye.
Unanimously carried.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, then I'm going to adjourn this special meeting so we can get back into the Vision Committee meeting. Is that appropriate? Do I need a motion for that, or can I
Nope,
just do it?
Just do it.
How's that? All right. Okay, we're back in Vision Committee. If you wanted, we'd like to have you fill out one of these forms and give it to myself or Cindy if you want to come and talk, and I would encourage that. Come on up but fill one of these out. So this is your ticket to talk. Are you staring at me, Mr. Reynolds?
Did he fill one out?
You have to. All right, so let me repeat. This is twofold. One is that that persistent discussion about how hard it is to work here in Canyon City, and I think it's a lot commercial. And I'd like to discuss that. What do you think? Please be hopefully helpful. And then the second is I'd like to also talk, if you want to do it at the same time, talk about what you think about moving to 2018, or maybe a suggestion on that. because I do believe we need to move forward and take a look at that. Maybe, I don't want to take anything away from staff. Am I doing that?
No.
Yes? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. I just know that I did get that letter some years ago, soon after I became mayor, and it warned, and I think the rates did go up. I do know that the county has also said, or someone there had said that they can't get their people certified, so it's time we do that. I have talked to builders that do it under 2018 out of Pueblo, don't seem to have a problem with it. They move things around so that it's more agreeable to how they build things, so it's nothing to fear. But then the second one is, let's talk, if you want to talk about streamlining or problems that you foresee. And again, I believe it's not just today, it's off into the future, because Canyon City is being discovered, so to speak, and we're going to have a lot more people come and look. And how can it make it easier on everybody, staff and you, to do business here? And if it isn't, then it isn't. But, I mean, it will be. I didn't say that right. So help us out. Tell us what you think and what would be helpful. All right? That's what's called a pleading. I'm sorry. All right. Rob Brown. There you go.
Good afternoon. And I was just wandering by. I didn't intend to speak, but your plea caused me to, find my heart in this situation.
Good.
So
Good.
I'm here. I guess Rob Brown's my name. I'm representing FEDC, Fremont Economic Development Corporation. I'm been participating with that organization for a while. What you may not know about me is in my real life, my real job is that I've built projects all over the United States. In fact, I've got industrial construction projects that I've completed in 42 different states. So I do have some experience in the building industry. Because of that, we have taken on the tact at FEDC that we want to try to help people produce good work and get through the system. So a number of years ago, we put a button on our website that we call the Rapid Response Team. And the Rapid Response Team mobilizes to try to help people work their way through these particular problems. Now, since we put that button up there, we get a lot of people that push the button, but we've never had anybody that pushed the button and said, hey man, things just went really great with the city, or things went really easily through the county. That just simply doesn't happen. So understanding from a perspective point of view, we may not have a lot of the other side of the story, but the side of the story that we do frequently get is that it is challenging, and it's usually challenging because people are making the assumption, I believe, that when you work and live in a smaller community, that things relative to a government will be simpler or easier or faster or whatever they believe to be the case, and that's usually not the case in this particular situation. So I'm going to offer up a couple of things. One is that a number of years ago, before we had some significant changes in city government, FEDC sponsored a couple of initiatives, and one of them was the Regional Building Authority. And Mr. O'Rourke and I and others talked about that as a possible way to improve the overall situation in the community. It may be time to revisit that discussion, because there's a lot of resources that are currently being paid for by each entity in the county that could be possibly overlapped, and maybe there's some savings of money, or maybe the services could be improved upon. So I'm going to offer that up. The second thing that we did in that time frame is that we sponsored a monthly meeting where we brought together local contractors and city staff for the purpose of having discussions about how these things work. So instead of having an occasional meeting like this, we had a monthly, regularly scheduled meeting. We met at 7 a.m. before normal work hours, and we were able to create some momentum and some relationship building between the entities. So I would recommend that maybe we revisit that concept as well. I think it's important for city staff to understand the challenges and difficulties that the construction community is experiencing. But most importantly, I think what I would like for council to understand is that the viewpoint, I believe, of the citizen is not that the city is working in what I would consider to be a customer service friendly type environment. They have a difficult story to tell. They have a lot of moving parts, and so frequently the message that's conveyed is very negative. And because it's negative, I believe that those citizens that are trying to do projects are reluctant to bring them forward because they're concerned that if in mid-project they bring something up, that they might face retribution and their project might get slowed down, or they might be caused to do additional work or whatever. So I think that that's a public relations component that we could all work on together to get past that particular point. I think to Councilperson Smith's point of view, she asked about, bring some of these ideas to us, and frankly, I have several cases that we could do that with, and in all those cases, the owner said, no, thank you. I'm not sitting down with council, I'm not sitting down with the city administrator, I'm not sitting down with the mayor, I'm not sitting down with staff, because I'm concerned that I don't want to make a bigger issue out of this than needs be, because I have to continue to move my project forward. And I know that on my current follow-up, I've got 8 projects that I'm working on right now between the city and the county that are having some kind of what they feel like are challenges in producing good work with those projects. And in each case, we've made some incremental progress recently, and they're moving forward. But I wanted to make sure that it's understood that this isn't a myth. It isn't something that somebody dreamed of. It's the reality that's occurring out there in the market. Whether it's correct or not doesn't matter. It's a perception. And so what I would encourage council to do and city staff to do is look at it from a public relations point of view and try to put some pieces in place that work, and then ultimately look at it from a standard work or a process flow kind of a point of view and see if there are some things that we could do to help improve the processes so that citizen is moved through the system quicker. So those are my thoughts.
You do and said that you have projects in other areas.
Yes.
Would you want to disclose or talk about what it would be? What is it different there?
Well, that's a great question. I'll give you an example. I did a project in Adams County. I built a grocery store there. I took a derelict property, I purchased it, I raised the building, and I put a new grocery store, an ethnic grocery store on that corner. The project went exceedingly well because grocery stores, as you may or may not know, but they do about 60% of their annual volume between November 1 and December 31. So you've got to get that place opened up on a particular calendar, or they lose practically an entire year worth of business. Mm-hmm. In that situation, on the day that we were going to get the sign-off for the certificate of occupancy, the fire department in that particular case said, we think there should be another fire hydrant on this property. Now, this property had been there for 60 years, been fully developed for 60 years. And he said, I said, we simply didn't have that in the plan. You've approved a set of plans. He goes, yeah, I know we approved it all, but now that I'm here looking at it and it's ready to sign off, he says, we're going to need a fire hydrant. Well, it cost me a little over $100,000 to horizontally bore under Pecos Avenue, which is a state highway, to put in a fire hydrant in front of the building, okay? That's a problem. That's a problem for the project. It's a problem for the timing. It was a problem for my net profit. That's the worst case scenario that I can give you about how is it to work with a community. Those kinds of things happen no matter where you are. The key is that that's a much bigger, in that case I paid $200,000 traffic impact fee for that property as well. That's what it's like dealing in a metro market, so you kind of get used to that. But then when you contrast that to a rural market, we don't have those same things. We see you people at the grocery store, we see at church. It's a familiarization process that we have with each other, and so I think the belief is that we should be able to do things better than they do them in those other communities. Is it a problem that's consistent with every building department and every metropolitan area, any kind of a community? Yes, it's consistent across the world, but that's not good enough for us. We just went through the small business revolution thing. We've shined a light on our community that is as bright as ever, and that means that we're going to have more building opportunities, and we're going to have to do a better job because the expectation is we can do a better job in a small community. So I guess that's my answer, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Meiser.
I share some of your concerns and challenges from a standpoint that I've met with contractors, that the response that I get from I'm not trying to demean anybody, but the response that I get from administration is to show me some examples, give me some examples,
Yep.
so that we can address real problems and not rumors. I just don't know how we get through the process where contractors tell me, you're crazy if you think that I'm going to say something because of the retribution thing that theoretically doesn't exist. But it's a challenge for administration to come back and try to identify or to rectify some problems when we can't identify the problems. We're like chasing our tails all the time, it seems like. So I don't know how
I
we
think
get
that's
through that
accurate.
process.
Well, that's why, one of my goals in life is that I don't like to just come up and talk about a problem. I like to talk about some potential solutions. And that's why I offered that solution where FEDC would be willing to conduct those meetings between city staff and the building community here to try to improve that relationship. Because in many cases, I think it's just simply as simple as a misunderstanding. Or sometimes there are rules that are there for a reason. It just requires that somebody does a better job of explaining to that citizen. Or it's possible that maybe it needs to happen sooner in the process. That's what I typically see. The citizen makes assumptions on their project, and as they progress the project, they learn things as they go, and those things are typically expensive. And that's usually or they're expensive in money or time, potentially. So I think we need to improve the process, improve the public relations piece, and relax that citizen or that builder to the point where they feel comfortable in making those comments, because that concern is real. And there's at least one project owner that is not in this room tonight for that exact reason. And I got a call from somebody earlier today asking me about that. And that's unfortunate that person feels like if they speak too loudly that maybe it will negatively impact their project. That's just not something that we can settle for. And I think we can work through that if we do a little relationship building here.
Ms. Smith?
I have a couple of questions for you, Rob. Thank you for coming with solutions and helping to be a part of making it better.
You're welcome.
When you talked about the monthly meetings with contractors and staff, how many people came to those meetings?
We usually had about 6 to 8 contractors represented, and one or two of the building staff people, depending on who it was at the time.
And what happened to those meetings? Why did they quit happening?
I think it was just one of those, here's the situation with economic development in general, and I think Ryan Stevens will concur with this, but when the economy isn't so good, then economic development is way more important and plays a bigger role. And when there were fewer building permits being pulled, then there were more people worrying about generating activity. When we started to see our own economy here improve and things started to happen, some of those types of initiatives tended to fade away. So I think it was just a natural situation where there wasn't as much of a concern at that particular moment in time. Plus, the contractors were pretty darn busy. So I think now, if we revisit that, we're going to have to factor that in because these guys are busy. They're doing a lot of work. So we'll have to figure out a way to make that work better.
Do you see contractors being willing to come and reignite that?
I'm
task
positive
force?
that they'll come. I have no doubt about that.
And when you talk about people who are feeling uncomfortable about coming to council or staff or the mayor, would they feel comfortable meeting with our Economic Development Director, Ryan Stevens? We hired him to be their advocate.
Yeah, I think they would.
The city. And
Absolutely.
so
I think it's just a matter of hearing their voice, but there's no lack of distrust between citizens and government. I mean, that's just the way of the world. So part of it is just we need to relax that concern. And I think the way you do that is by demonstrating some positive results with these types of activities.
Okay, well, and with that said, I think at the end of this meeting, we will talk about those steps that we want to take to get those results. But in the meantime, please direct them to Ryan Stevens.
Yeah, by all means.
Yes.
I'm happy to play that role, by the way. I'm the city's best advocate. I grew up here. I live here. I travel the country talking about Canyon City, so I am perfectly comfortable in that environment. And I frequently find myself in a position of being that voice of reason and trying to help people calm down and realize that, there's two sides to every story. But the reality is we have a challenge that we need to work on
Right,
together.
and it comes the other way too. There's a lot of times when there are problems, and we just simply we've never heard about it for months on end, and so we could have helped be part of the solution as well if we had known up front as well. If the contractor was having problems, or the owner was having problems, that we need to know those things too. So it goes both ways as well. So
Understood.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because we do want to be able to be, like you said, have a rapid response
Right.
when the issues arise, but we need to know what those issues are. You said you had a number of people that, have those angsts or problems or conflict and upsets. How many of those do you think are because they don't have adequate capital to carry out the project to begin with?
All of them. Yeah, right. I mean, nobody ever comes into a project and said, we have way too much money here, so, it's going to be a problem. So I think that's always the case, is that, you buy a historic building, you stretch yourself to buy it possibly, and then you find all of these issues that you now have to deal with, and it makes no logical sense to the layman. They say this building has been this way forever, just like my example of the fire hydrant. There's never been a fire hydrant there for 60 years. Why is it a problem today? And those are the situations that I think are the most emotionally charged, because you have somebody that is right at the edge of their budget, and they're trying to make a reasonably good financial decision, and the deeper they get into the project, the more expensive it gets. And it's not even about meeting code per se, it's about spending the money necessary to meet code. But there's other examples on the far other extreme, where you've got undeveloped property that doesn't really have any historical element or those types of things that are equally challenging. And so part of it is, I think, an education process at the beginning, so everybody is on exactly the same page, and that's a challenge that only the city can take on. FEDC can certainly help advocate on behalf of the citizen and advocate on behalf of the city in this example, but ultimately the carrier of that message has to be the city staff.
And I have one more question. And I don't know if you have an answer right now, but even if you could get back to me later, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
And what would you say are some cities that are in similar size to Canyon City that do have a reputation of being customer friendly for businesses and contractors and for doing the process, so that we can do a little bit of research and study and find, some other towns that maybe we can learn from and emulate?
That's a great question, and I'd be happy to do a little research, because I've been fortunate enough to be on the State Economic Development Commission now. I've traveled to several other communities, and we didn't have that opportunity before. We've been to Montrose, we've been to Delta, we've been to Trinidad, we're going to Fort Morgan, and all of those have great examples of very successful building departments, city services, and so forth. But frankly, I've never asked them that question, and as you just presented it. So I'd be happy to reach out and see if I could get you some additional information about that.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about those cities, and maybe we can find some representatives when we have maybe our workshop or seminar or whatever, that they could be invited. Some reps could be invited.
Absolutely.
To attend.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it's because you quit bringing donuts.
The donut thing might have been a factor.
Okay.
That is clearly clearly a factor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you, Rob. What? Mr. Meisner, you didn't, oh, yes, you did, I'm sorry.
Just to reiterate. To reiterate, kind of what he's saying is, I've been involved in at least a couple of contractor-related issues where contractors or owners have contacted me with an issue that they can't seem to get resolved. And I got to tell you, I think in all of the issues that I've been involved with, which mostly involve Adam, when you start looking at it, I've got these problems with the contractor and these problems with the city, and I get with administration and say, we got to fix this. And those parties get together and fix it. and the contractor's calling me and saying, thanks, and I'm saying, I really didn't do anything. I mean, I think it boils down to proactively trying to communicate and help each other through each project. And conveying that act of cooperation. And I'm not sure exactly how we do that, but I don't know of any of those situations where the city didn't kind of step forward and provide a solution and things got done. But I just don't know how you get that proactive communication going all the time. It's a challenge, but if we could do that, I think it would make a huge difference in our problems.
We can do it. We clearly can do it. We have proved in recent weeks that when we mobilize for a single cause, we can do it. And so it's just a question of elevating it to a level of priority that causes us all to be creative and make these solutions. And I think the people that are going to speak after me, and I'm sorry for dominating the time here, but the people that are going to speak afterwards are going to tell you about their individual challenges, but all of them can be resolved. And you're fortunate to be on city council and be in a position to do that. I think you've got a solid staff. It's just a matter of direction and desire. So I have confidence that you can fix it.
Ms. Turner?
I have a couple questions. You mentioned the education process happening up front could be helpful, and I agree. I mean, I think I've heard from people who've opened businesses in town in the last couple of years who say, I got halfway through and all of a sudden I had this huge expense that I wasn't expecting. Have you seen other communities that are doing that well that we could look to as an example?
No, I think Councilperson Smith's question relates to that, and I would love to say yes, I could give you a list of those. I'll do the research. I think that's a very compelling question, and I'm imagining a scenario where there's actually some transfer of information at the beginning of the project that would help that person. But in almost all cases that I've seen, it results in them hiring a design professional or a professional engineer or somebody that can answer those questions up front, and that typically comes at a fairly high cost relative to the project. And so I think we're all inclined to try to get by on a lower budget, but there are certain circumstances where there really is no alternative but to get a professional involved. And I also think that with our historic buildings and all the issues related to bringing things up to code or the requirements for ADA and all these types of things, that's just one of those conditions that makes these even more difficult. So I think we have to be even more nimble when we look at these situations, even more thoughtful about how we work on them. In fact, frequently I'm asked, why would you want to live in Canyon City? Why would you want to live in Fremont County? And that's what I tell them. I don't talk about the weather. I don't talk about the things like that. I say we have great people here that have a can-do spirit, and we're nimble. We're small enough that we can turn on a dime and we can make things happen. And this is a great example of that. I literally was notified of this meeting 7 hours ago, and we're here with council and the mayor and city staff all listening, right? That's our advantage. So let's exploit the advantage. Let's fix the problem. Mm-hmm. But I'll get you some case studies that we can use
I'd love to see anyone who's doing this well already. Rather than having to create wholesale.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. You talk about our cooperative attitude, and I just want to reassure everyone who's here, and for you as well, that my attitude is that we need businesses and services in this town. Clearly, I think that's something I hear about from residents often, are the need for more services here that other larger communities have, or maybe even there's communities our size. Mm-hmm. So as a council person, I think our role as a city should be encouraging all of that growth and development, because it's what our residents want. It's part of what makes Canyon a good place to live, is that we can do things without having to leave our communities. And so I just want to make sure everyone's aware of it. That's how, and I think the council as a whole feels that way. Is I don't like to have to drive to the Springs or to Pueblo to shop or to do other things. I'd rather stay here in the community because we are rural, we're remote. It'd be great if I could do everything I needed to do here in town. And so I think our focus has been and needs to continue to be that we are open for business and that we want people to come here and start businesses. You mentioned the fear of retribution that people feel and not wanting to bring forward their issues. To me, that's really concerning. I hate to hear that. Do you think, have you seen that happen? Do you think that's
The retribution or the fear?
well, I know the fear is real.
Yeah, I've seen the fear. I haven't seen the retribution.
Okay.
I think it could be perceived as such because, you know, when you start to scrutinize the project, the closer you look, the more challenges you may discover. And that may feel like retribution to the person that's dealing with it. But I don't see that. I'm willing to look beyond, give the city staff and council benefit of the doubt that they're not going to, you know, put their thumb on somebody just because they said something you didn't like. But I think the feeling that may happen is real, and I think the perception may be that it's actually happened. But have I witnessed it myself? I couldn't say I have.
Okay. And then I guess my last question for you is, I mean, clearly people are coming to you and expressing their problems. I'm not sure if this is an option, but could you give us a list of kind of the most commonly seen issues
Sure.
that you hear about? I know people may not want to come out personally and attach their name to their complaint, but it would be helpful for us, like Councilman Meisner was saying, to know really what are the practical issues that we should be our highest priority to address, so that we're not focusing our efforts in an area that maybe isn't problematic right now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to catalog them. I get them frequently enough that, and they are consistent.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely, we
That
can
would be
do
very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Be happy to.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Thank you for being here.
You
And
bet.
thank you for being the voice for the masses, because I know that this has been an ongoing issue between,
By the way, I'm not positive I'm the voice for the masses, but I certainly am the voice for
Yeah.
this moment in time. So,
That
I
is your
understand.
title now.
yeah, there you go.
yeah. You are labeled the voice of the masses.
That's the nicest thing I've been called today. So.
So you brought up a regional building authority.
Correct.
And my question, I have a couple of questions about this, because I've spoken to many contractors about their work in other communities where there's a regional building authority. How different, in your experience, how different is it to work with the county and the city?
I think it's very similar.
Okay.
I think the advantage to a regional building authority, in my opinion, is that you're able to bring in services that are typically done at the state level to the local level, meaning that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you building professionals that are in the room, I may have this wrong, but it's my belief that at least electrical is still handled, at the state level. So
And plumbing.
And plumbing. And so if you're a contractor, especially a small contractor, and you miss the Thursday or the Wednesday or whatever that they're going to be here, you don't get your inspection done, that means you wait a week. And I don't know if you've seen any of the construction going on in our community, but those guys are working 7 days a week and long days. That time is money. And so those are the types of things that really affect a small community like ours. And so if we were to team up with the others in the community like we've done on some of the other initiatives, then I think that you could afford then to have some additional resources that you brought
Sure.
to pass here. So I think that's the value. And when we did the analysis before, we found that we could do it in roughly the same financial picture of the combination of the three building departments. So it wasn't a huge cost savings, but what we did see the advantages is the additional resources. So that was really kind of the special part there. And it allowed each of the inspectors and people that are doing those types of things to have a more consistent work environment and things like that. So I think there would be some benefits there. And I didn't necessarily come to discuss that in detail, but I do think it does have merit and it would be worth discussing. And in a community of 47,000 people, having one building department probably makes more sense than having three or more.
Okay, then my second question is, do you notice that contractors might feel the same way between the county and the city? So if they're building in the county, do they
Yeah,
experience the same problems?
You have
the
the
same
sibling
issues?
rivalry thing. If you're building in the city, then you wish you were building in the county. And if you're building in the county, you might wish that you're building in the city. And it has to do with personalities and staff and
Sure.
different things like that. But I do believe, to be completely intellectually honest about this, that most people feel like it's more challenging working in Canyon City than it is working in the county. And understand that the county has a different set of rules that they're playing by, and a lot more, physical geography that they're dealing with. So I think that's kind of to be expected. But that within the city I think there is the perception that it's more difficult.
Sure. Okay.
I'm trying to
and
be
then-
diplomatic here because
I understand.
I have to be able to drive home tonight. So
I understand. Adam's going to take you out on the way out.
yeah, exactly. No, Adam and I are both.
No, I'm just kidding. That was a complete joke.
Retribution.
Okay, we're getting off track here.
So my last question is, we did that Business 101,
Yeah.
and that included some of the building department in that, but I think we only did one class.
About 6 months ago.
Wasn't that supposed to be an ongoing thing?
About 2-3 times a year. We'll be having another one soon, but I think, as related to this subject, probably we need a separate course just for building services and the development process.
Sure, that's what I was getting at,
Yeah,
was,
so we can put that together,
Can we streamline
yeah.
this so that there's,
So we're not talking about also code enforcement
Right.
and other unrelated matters. They need something, a 101 on how to go through our building process. Yeah, we can do that.
Do you think that would be attended? If
Yeah,
we
I
offered-
think it would be. I think the citizen or the owner, that's thinking about a project probably would do that. We have one owner that I've been working with that's preparing to build a project that got hung up in the approval process. And in that case, they're out of state. So they don't have a good, mechanism to participate in something like that. And in that case, we can help be their, boots on the street, so to speak, in that situation. But I think, generally speaking, education is always a positive. Earlier in the process, the better.
okay.
Ms. Smith?
I just had a follow-up question from what Dolly had questioned about the regional authority and how you talked about we could provide more resources like for plumbing and electrical inspections. It seems like oftentimes some of the consternations are with submitting plans that they need to have an engineer look at those plans. Are there opportunities or ways that that it could be more, I don't know, something provided where maybe some consultation from an engineer could be provided for these guys, or is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, that's a challenge in our community because we don't have this, ready force of engineers and architects that are in our community. We do finally have a couple of people that are playing that role. So if you do have some of the more challenging situations, then you're going to have to reach outside the community, and that is expensive, and it's not that easy to accomplish. So there may be a solution there that would include some kind of a recommendation or a quick link, to make these introductions, or something along those lines, or like we have other contract services, that might be something that we could consider here. But bottom line is, it's not that easy to accomplish here, that part of it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
So to add to Rob, if you want to see a good building department, it's really easy to identify them. They're going to be the rapid growth communities that have huge volume of activity, and they have a premium on speed. So places like Castle Rock, Parker, Douglas County, I'll guarantee you they have a smooth operating machinery, because I once managed the 6th fastest growing city in the country, and it was a well-oiled machine. When you're doing 2,500 residents a year, you've got to be good. So if you want to see a well-oiled machine, go to a community like that.
Can we do that apples to apples with the size of Canyon City?
Well, it's not so much apples. You're looking at process. What's their process? That can be applied to anyone. It's just like any business engineering. Look at the process they use, whether it's through education, as Rob's talked about, the outreach, the simplicity of the process, the metrics they use. For example, we had a metric that we had to get a set of residential plans out within 3 weeks. Or you could use a private engineer to stamp those plans if you were wanting to get it done faster than that, because that's how fast they were building. They can't wait longer than that. So you can look at what metrics do they use to measure their performance, and is it acceptable to the industry. So we could easily talk to communities like that, because that's my experience, is that the rapid growth communities always have the best processes and machinery for getting development done, because they're growing like wildfire.
So my husband was a plans examiner for the town of Castle Rock back in 2003 through 2006, and that was when no, it was actually 2008. So the building boom was hitting at that time, and they were developing a lot of these processes while he was there. So he and I sat down and talked about this quite a bit, how they developed their building department in Castle Rock, and it's just kind of evolved from there. But they've updated and since then. But
And Douglas,
I will
Douglas
concur.
is the fastest growing county in the country. It has been for the last 10 years. I'll guarantee you, that's like the General Motors of building services. They've got to punch it out.
Okay,
Otherwise, they couldn't accommodate the growth.
right.
So we can look into that.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks,
'Cause
Rob.
we have-
you.
We have other people that would like to speak, and we need to, so we'd like to call Will Colin.
Good evening.
Hi, Will.
First thing, just since I have the opportunity to talk to you, completely off topic, one of my employees today, or yesterday maybe, Susie Atherton, received a letter from all of you that was all signed, thanking her for the work she did with the Revolution. She did put her heart and soul into it, and the letter made her whole day. So I want to first thank you all for that. She really, really, really appreciated that. But the reason that I'm here today is to talk about the building, as we have been. Unlike Rob, I don't have a lot of experience in this. I'm a business owner here. I'm not a contractor. I'm not an engineer. I'm just a guy that needs to have a building built to protect some of my property. I early on knew that I was going to build this building, came in, part of the process, and I don't know if that's meant to be that way or not, but I did come in and talk to the building department here. They were great, walked me through it, showed me how to do it, thought I had all my ducks in a row, went out, and I'll just tell my story from my point of view so you guys kind of get an idea of the frustration that I'm sure some of the other people are feeling in the community. Got all my ducks in a row, so I thought, hired an engineer and an architect. They drew up the plans, and when we went to submit the drawings to the third party that Canyon City has hired, which is CCC, is that right, CCC?
Yep.
We kept getting them sent back, and they were asking for engineering math on everything. I talked to both the guy at CCC, Gil Rose Miller, I believe his name is, and my engineer, and back and forth. And because I'm not an engineer, I kind of felt like the man in the middle. Very difficult to speak their language, very difficult to figure out exactly what was going on. The way I looked at it is I have stamped drawings from an engineer, you know, let's move forward. I want to get them. Keep in mind, I'm building a pole barn. It's a pole barn. It's not a Holiday Inn Express. It's a pole barn. It is commercial, but all the same, it's just a place to house vehicles. That's the whole design behind this. I should mention that my engineer and the architect and the people who are going to actually be prefabbing the building to bring it up here do this stuff all the time. They work together, as a matter of fact. They've worked together on different projects in lots of different counties and cities. Since I've started this process, somewhere the first of the year, they have done this over and over and over and over again, where they've built buildings and they're out and they're stamped and they're done and they're probably completed at this point. And I'm still sitting here spinning my wheels, trying to get the third party and that works for Canyon City and my engineer face to face. I came in and met with some of the staff just a couple days ago. Thought we were kind of on the same, trying to push things forward. Staff here, by the way, has so far been wonderful with me. I haven't had any issues there. I think they're very helpful. But we're still at this crossroads where we just can't seem to get past it. And I'm not trying to build a Taj Mahal. I just want a building. In the process of this, I started to go out and talk to other people, talk to other builders, engineers, architects, and started to get information and saying, hey, what can you help me? What can you do? I should also mention when I first started this process, I have friends who are builders here in town, and I went to them and said, hey, I'm thinking about building a building. Are you interested? Heck yeah, Will, we're interested. We'll build it for you. You're going to build it out on the east side of town where you have some property? And I said, oh, no, I'm going to build it in Canyon City. 3 out of the 4 contractors I talked to said, oh, sorry, we're tapping out. And then I just want you guys to know the feeling. That's the feeling out there. They were like, nope, we won't build that for you in Canyon City. Too much of a headache, too much brain damage, we're tapping out. The one that said, and the one that went ahead and said, yeah, I'd go ahead and do it, his cost was incredibly high, a lot higher than where we thought the building should be. And I never really asked him why, but I have a feeling as to why, because he knows there's going to be additional brain damage to him in order to get this thing to go through. So after that process has started, I've talked, like I said, engineers and stuff, and I've asked them, what's the deal? And they have repeatedly told me it's more difficult to build here in Canyon City. Now, when I started this, I told you I'm not an engineer and I'm not a builder. I don't know the details. I can't give you what you've asked of Rob, the details of what it is. Why is it more difficult? I can't, and I haven't even been through this process once yet. I'm just trying to get my feet wet right now. So I'm really of very little help to you guys as far as telling you that. I don't have answers like Rob does. But to give you a feeling of somebody who's going through the process right now, that's the feeling I get. I talked to an engineer, and I asked him point blank, I was like, so you engineer buildings all over Colorado, correct? He said, yep. And I said, do you do anything outside of Colorado? He says, oh, yeah. I said, how long have you been doing it? He says, a long time. I go, where's the most difficult place for you to get plans through? Well, Canyon City's in the top 4. I don't think that's right. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult. Now, in my specific case, it comes down to interpretation of the rules, apparently, the book that everybody keeps looking at. I believe that maybe the way some people interpret them is different than the way, or I should say maybe the way the Canyon City staff interprets them is different than the way we out here trying to build up a building interpret them. There seems to be a difference. I hear the word interpretation is pretty thick amongst the builders here in town. They interpret things different than the way the city interprets them. So when you're reading through something, whatever detail it might be in the code book, it's interpreted different. And just from what I've witnessed, and again, I'm very new to this, that seems to be a common issue of how we can come together. I don't know when you guys move to the 2018 code book, if I know you guys can kind of cherry pick out of that what you like and what you don't like and approve it as city council, but I think it needs to be very black and white, so there is no interpretation. So anybody who reads that can interpret it the same way. That would be the only recommendation that I can possibly give you from the very short bit of experience that I've had in this process.
Any questions? Mr. Meisner, thank you.
Thanks, Will. I can kind of relate to Will's statement of interpretation. In my small project that building did a very good job with, I had an issue of installing a plate that I was given a copy of whatever it's called as to what that plate was required. And I wound up having an involved discussion with another building official about what that black and white verbiage said about how that plate needed to be installed. And I finally won my argument in terms of showing them back the verbiage that they gave me that said this is how the plate will be installed. So black and white's not necessarily the solution, but we get into those interpretation problems where building official, not being Kathy, saying, this is what has to happen. You look at the rule book and you say, that's not what it says here, but the building official is dictating what's going on. So those are some of the things that we need to be able to work through. I was able to work through mine, but mine was in black and white, and it was an interpretation issue. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, in my personal case, we're supposed to have engineering calculations, and I was told by the third party on everything. And I thought, well, that's a pretty broad term. Can you define everything for me? And he told me, now he denied this in our last meeting, but he told me everything from screws up. Screws, 2x4s, 4x4s, hangers, beams, everything. And that's what he told me. He also told my architect the exact same thing, because I, after the meeting, called him and said, did you hear that the same way I did? So I do have some concerns the way he interprets it and what he says, because what he said in the meeting 2 days ago was not the same as what he told me personally. But I think it's absolutely insane. I did talk to an engineer afterwards and said, yeah, sure, I'll do all those calculations for you. My building, by the way, materials and to build it, we've estimated will cost me $85,000. He told me that it will take him 260 hours to do all those calculations. An engineer gets paid, a cheap one is probably $100 an hour. So all of a sudden, I've got an additional $26,000 that would be added onto my building. Now, yesterday or day before yesterday, the third party said, oh, I didn't say all that. So I'm still not completely 100% sure what we have to have calculations on, but I talked to an engineer again, another engineer, not mine, who said if it's the bare minimum, I can do it for 100 hours. That's still something that, on a project of that size, that I wasn't expecting. We were talking, Rob brought up a fire hydrant. Well, out of the blue, here's an extra, 10 grand thrown onto it that I really wasn't expecting. So maybe I hired the wrong engineer. That's a possibility. But this engineer and this architect and the people who are putting up these buildings build them all over Colorado. Matter of fact, they told me that 2 weeks ago they had 5 pole barns that they got a permit to build in Colorado, 5 different ones in different places, and they did it all in a week. I know a person here in town who won't build in Canyon City, and he hand drew out plans for a house in Chaffee County, took them to the county. They looked at it. They had one question about a wall that they wanted engineered. They engineered that wall. They got the stamp, although he'd done it correctly. Hand-drawn out plans. They had the plans done, the building built, the house, a very nice house, in 6 months. I'm at my month 3 of a pole barn. That's where granted, mine's commercial, that's a house, all the same. I haven't heard about too many buildings falling down in Colorado because they were poorly designed. I have an engineer stamp. In my opinion, that should be good. He's the one that will take the fall if the building falls over. He's the one that stamped it. The city doesn't take on any liability. The engineer does, and that's why they went to school. That's why they got the stamp. That's my interpretation of it. But that's not the city's.
Okay. Ms. Cochran?
So I want to first start by saying that I saw the interview today on the news, and I want to thank you for being such a wonderful proponent for this area. It was a wonderful article, and I hope it brings people to the area, so thank you for that. You said initially in the beginning, you came and talked to staff, and they kind of walked you through the process. Do you think that that could have been more thorough? Do you think that would have kind of helped with some of the issues you're seeing now? Or is it just stuff that kind of comes up along the way?
You know,
that-
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I would have never imagined there would be this gap between what happens in other municipalities and what my engineer does there in Canyon City. I wouldn't have thought there'd be that big of a difference. You know, if I just picked an engineer that was fresh out of school and this was his first project, okay, there might be, but this guy's been doing it for a long time and he's worked all over the state. And just doesn't run into this level of scrutiny.
So then I guess my next question would be, would it be beneficial for the city to have some sort of seminar or class or something with engineers so that everybody's on the same page and we're not running into issues where, you know, you start a project thinking that you're doing the right thing, and then there's issues between
Sure.
engineers and the city staff. Can we somehow streamline so that they're on the same page?
That has historically not been an issue. Will's situation is rather unique, and council can address it in a couple different ways, but most engineers, and it depends on the jurisdiction, not all communities, whether it be county or city in Colorado, require structural calculations with plans, but communities such as Parker, Lone Tree, Jefferson County, Pueblo, they do. In fact, even Fremont County on a case-by-case basis will require structural calculations. The reason for that is like a second opinion from a doctor or an audit on a financial manager to review the quality of work, because even engineers are not infallible. I've got 3 projects right here. One of them is a major project where they actually thanked us because they made errors in their seismic and wind load calculations on a $5 million building. Now, you don't have to require this, and we could bring a memo to you on May the 6th that would eliminate that requirement, because there are locations, Montrose is one, I think Alamosa, Durango, they don't require it. So it is something that we have historically practiced. We've never had an issue. I'm not saying the concerns aren't valid, but if you don't want us to do that, you simply, again, remove it from the code requirements. But we have never had an issue with an engineer saying, yeah, check my work. I mean, Boeing would have been well-served today if someone had checked their work. But that's the reason we do it, is for that prudence and ensuring that a building is going to be structurally sound. Because you're right, we're not liable, but we have a greater duty. We are responsible for life, safety, and welfare of the people that live here. They should be fairly secure that when they walk into a commercial or residential building, it's not going to collapse on them because of an engineering miscalculation. But that's your call. That's something you can change if you direct us.
Okay, Ms. Turner?
Well, I mean, that makes me wonder if there isn't a middle ground we can strike between not requiring anything and also not putting someone tens of thousands of dollars in the hole for their project and delaying them by 3 months. You know, there has to be some sort of compromise that we can strike as a city that puts us in line with the rest of the municipalities in Colorado. I mean, I don't want to be an outlier in this way. That's not something that I think any of us want to claim, is that we're one of the top 4 most difficult places to build a building or start a business. So I think we need to be more creative in our approach other than just proposing that we eliminate the requirement altogether.
Well, it's hard to define. I mean, Fremont County is unique, and they do it on a case-by-case basis. That can lead to discrimination or retribution. I mean, either you do it or you don't do it. It's really hard to determine, okay, what structure, what kind of building are we going to do and require secondary structural calculations. I mean, so that's the reason you see across country either they're required or they're not required. Because it's really hard to find that gray area where you're going to green light certain projects and they don't have to provide it, and then require others. Because to be honest, there should be no additional cost. Engineers have to do this when they design the building. They have to create these calculations. They most always do it through software programs called structural calc, or old schoolers will do it in handwritten form. But they have to do this when they're doing the work. Just like a finance director has to do the general ledger in order to get it audited. They're not suddenly creating numbers when the auditor comes along. This is just the normal process they use, and most appreciate the fact that they're getting the scrutiny of a second professional opinion to make sure they're correct, because they don't want to be liable for an error. And we normally will find that happens. It's not a unicorn. I got 3 projects just in the last couple of months where there were structural calculation errors. We're not saying the engineers weren't competent, but people make mistakes.
Okay, Mr. Meisner?
I again recognize your issue. Keep in mind that you need that little engineering stamp on those plans, and that little stamp comes with a price. So at one point, you're paying for that engineer's expertise, and then on step 2, you're coming back and paying somebody else, which I understand the administrator's point, to verify those calculations. So you're paying for the same thing twice, and I understand that. But as we move forward, maybe a division is between, I don't know how you classify this, but buildings that house people or structures that don't house people, in terms of where do you start dividing the line?
Okay. Ms. Gonzalez?
We've talked about it.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Colon?
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
you.
Will.
Would you keep us informed of what's going on, Will? I can. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Is there a Mr. Reynolds? Oh, there.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Dave Reynolds. Come on down.
I'm David Reynolds, 1677 Grand Avenue in Canyon City, and I hate following Rob Brown because I always sound like an idiot afterwards. And so I've been building in Canyon City since 1986, and so I've been around for quite a while. And we tried to start a regional building department in, I believe, the year 2000. Went through a lot of processes to try and make that happen. Eventually it failed. We tried again. Rob and I were trying to remember how many years ago it was. We tried again 4 or 5 years ago, and eventually that also failed. Both instances were started because builders were coming to us and saying, can't you do anything? It's impossible to build. Partially in the county, sometimes in the county, sometimes in Canyon City, went back and forth. At the time, I hadn't built a whole lot outside of Canyon City. Well, built in Salida, and that was at that time, before I moved here in '86, it was a different world. So I had a re-education when I got to Canyon City and found the building codes, not the codes, but the inspection process in both the city and the county as an eye-opening experience. I thought, that's okay, it's a bigger town. And over the years, there's been plenty of instances where we have had situations that were absolutely ridiculous, which made for a fun conversation with all the other builders, where we could say, you would not believe what happened here. And they go, oh yeah, I believe that. And so we had a lot of fun with those over the years. I ended up building 3 commercial buildings and a major live-in remodel for Black Hills Energy in Pueblo. And all 3 times had to work with a regional building department. And I can tell you, after working with them, I went, oh my gosh, this is the way it ought to be, because they were so easy to get along with. So partially what happens is, if the little detail, if the building department becomes too nitpicky, then that's all the builder or the owner can think about. I'll give you an example. A guy I know was doing a remodel in Canyon City. He ended up building a handicap bathroom. The building department came in and said, your handicap rail is 2 inches too far away from the toilet based on the code. So we need you to fur out this wall 2 inches so that you can move the handicap rail over 2 inches. Now, that ended up costing him, I don't know, $400 or $500. I actually didn't see the situation, so I can't personally verify that's exactly what happened. But he tells the story to everybody he knows. You will not believe what Canyon City made me do. And that's what happens. You begin to develop a relationship, a reputation for being hard to build in because of those nitpicking little details. I think maybe what we need is for the building department to lighten up and say, is it really a big deal that the handicap rail is 2 inches away? Yeah, it shouldn't be, but nobody is really going to be harmed. But let's not make this guy spend that kind of money. And that, I think, as I was listening, one of the things that was brought up a couple of years ago when we were working on the regional building department was the idea of having an ombudsman who is known to all the people who are taking out a building permit, that we have somebody that they can go to who is not the building department. And I'm thinking maybe Ryan Stevens might be the right person for that. That's something that you could initiate fairly soon. He would become the ombudsman's, yeah, he left the room. I said, no, he's there, he's still there. So that the owners could feel comfortable, or the builders could feel comfortable going to him and saying, building department's killing me here. And then he can look into the situation, he can come back and say, yeah, they got a good point. I'm afraid you're gonna have to stay with that. Or he can go to the building department and say, really? Really? Do we need to do this? Do we need to make this guy do that? Come on. And we can move everybody to the point where it's a lot easier to build. Now, one of the examples, for example, that I can give you for regional building department, I built my first building over there. I called them up and asked them for a drywall nail inspection. And they said, what? I said, you need to come out and inspect the nails in our drywall to make sure it's nailed off properly. And they said, seriously? And I said, well, you have to do it in Canyon City. And they go, well, yeah, but we don't do it around here. And that's just one of the little things that slows down a project when you do something and then again have to go wait for an inspection to come and inspect something before you can take the very next step. One of the things that we looked at the last time we talked about a regional building department was going over to Pueblo Regional Building Department and sat down with them and said, how do you do it? And you can look at all other towns our size, but if you can get us to do what the Pueblo Regional Building Department does, we'll be much better off. So I don't think you have to go any further than the regional, go to them and say, how do you do that? What's the processes? The other thing that they offered when we were over there is to be able to do, at the time they said, we could do your electrical and your plumbing for you. And rather than the state do it, we could do it for you. And it's a short 30-minute drive for us if we need to do something. And for example, if you have a project, we actually had a project, it was in the county, but the plumbing inspector said, this is not right, you're gonna have to move this pipe a foot. I remember the situation exactly, but he said we have to move the pipe a foot, or 6 inches. He said, I'll be back in a week to check it. And so all of a sudden you're stuck. You can make the correction, but it's a week before you get re-inspected again, so you can't pour your floor. There's a lot of things you can't do. So it is beneficial to be able to work with them. I think it's possible that working with the Pueblo Regional Building Department, you might be able to get them to assist in a period where you have inspections that are maybe out of the arena of the current building department here, and maybe some engineering as well. So plan inspection, they might even be able to help out with plan inspections rather than going to a third party that might not be too familiar with this particular area, or if you've got a problem with a inspector or a code reviewer who's nitpicking, fire him, get somebody else. You're not stuck with that guy. But the point is, we are not Denver, downtown Denver, where you need to have absolute by-the-line interpretation of the code book. And the code book is designed to, it's not, I don't know what it's designed to do, but it is, I think, designed to cover all situations. And you need to be able to lighten up on the interpretation and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. If you had the time, I could take you to 3 projects in town where we had to do something that you would look at and say, that is ridiculous. And yet, the building official at the time, and it was Greg Hutchison at the time, said, I know it's ridiculous, but the code requires it. I said, but wait a minute, why would you have the owner spend this kind of money for that? Yeah, I know, but it says, the line says here you have to do that. I said, yeah, but it's ridiculous. He says, I know it's ridiculous. So there's got to be a way in which you can say, you're right, it's ridiculous. Let's all sign off of it and not make the owner or the contractor spend the money. I think that's all I wanted to say, so I'm done.
Ms. Cochran?
So when you said you had tried a couple times to do a regional building authority, in your opinion, what was the reason it failed?
The first time we tried in 2000, it was because Greg Hutchison was afraid that he would lose his job as a head building inspector and head building official. And the city at that time felt they would lose control over construction within their area. The second time it failed, it was exactly the same reasons, but reversed. The county felt that they would lose control, and they would, in both cases, well, no, the first particularly, they would lose revenue, because at that time, the building department was a revenue generator for the city. I don't know, and the second time, and so we looked over the finances the second time, and the thing with the building department is there's times when it generates revenue and there are times when it loses revenue. And you can't really expect the building department to spend all the money, all the revenue that comes in just for the building department, because there are times when your building's strong and you're making good money. There are times when the building's not so strong, you're not making good money. So, but both situations, it was loss of control and loss of money.
Hey, under the wire. Mr. Meisner?
Well, I got it before you said okay. I think Dave brings up a good point from a standpoint. He didn't say it, but the regional thing would bring us consistency. It didn't matter whether you're building in Florence, the county, or the city. You're playing under the same rules with the same people. Second thing is, somehow we got to figure out to eliminate the little turfs that exist, that just naturally happen with people wanting to protect their area. And that's the big obstacle.
When we met with the county, I think we were both receptive to the idea of a regional authority. They had some issues regarding working 4 days a week, which we thought was inconvenient for the construction industry. We think a minimum 5 days a week, but that was a very important thing for them. Whether they could properly keep busy a plumbing and electrical inspector with the amount of work we had here, so the cost of doing that. I think we had no issues with the existing code. We were both on 2006. I think they would like to move to 18. So, but I don't think there were significant issues other than they are pretty enamored with that 4-day work week.
Okay. You don't have a button, do you, Tony?
No.
Okay. That says Dolly.
I just hit my button.
Well,
But we can certainly get back with it.
Ms. Turner?
Well, to follow up.
No, wait, I said Ms. Turner. You're next.
You haven't been recognized, Dolly.
I thought he said my name.
You're
You
not.
did say my name.
Let's move forward.
Thank you for coming to talk to us and tell us about these issues. I appreciate it. But I'm going to pick on you a little.
Okay.
For the example that you gave about the handicapped handrail in the bathroom. And I picturing myself in a wheelchair and trying to maneuver from a wheelchair to a toilet and thinking maybe that 2 inches could make a really big difference for me as a handicapped person. So I know you mentioned that no one would be harmed by that 2 inches, but I think maybe your example wasn't the best one. Part of the reason we have the building code is to be ADA compliant, and as we know, we have an elderly population here in the city, and people who have different abilities, and I just want to recognize that I think that example is one where that 2 inches could have made a big difference for someone.
Well, I think it's also possible that the building department could have said, how about we put some blocks behind where the rail mounts so that the rail comes out 2 more inches.
Sure.
But the code doesn't allow that.
Okay.
It doesn't say you could do that. And so can we be creative and say, let's solve this problem this way? as opposed to saying, no, we're going to follow the book line for line, and I don't care how much it costs.
So you're saying you could have still accomplished the 2-inch difference, but in a different way?
That wasn't even a choice.
Right.
But I think it could be.
Okay.
I think what needs to happen is there needs to be an attitude of, let's see how we can solve this problem. And then once that happens, then the owner can see that everybody's working to solve the problem. And there might be times when you say, I'm sorry, but we don't have any choice. It's a 40-pound roof load. I can't let you do it on a 30-pound roof load. That makes sense. Who's going to argue with that? But there are times when the details are just to the point where you say, is it really that big of a deal? And that's what I'm looking for.
I think what you're saying is we should all have an attitude of how can we get to yes.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Gonzalez?
Thank you. So I actually want to kind of hit on what you said about the county. I met with Mike Cox about 6 months ago, the building official at the county, and he was very much in favor of a regional building department. And the issue of a 4-day work week never came up. That was not an issue. If it was one department, the hours would be set on what the department chose it to be. But
We just insisted that we operate at least 5 days a week. For the industry, we want to be industry-friendly.
I think they would agree with that.
Yeah, at the time they didn't, but maybe they've changed their opinion.
So, but what I wanted to get to is how hard would it be to move towards a regional building authority?
I mean, we have many examples.
what
So you have
step-
a regional communications authority, it's very doable.
What steps would need to be taken in order
Just
to make that
direct
happen?
us to go back over there and see if we can come up with a winning scenario for, I mean, and what parameters you expect. If you don't mind a 4-day work week, then that's one of the parameters. If you insist on a 5-day work week, then that's one of our parameters, you know. Who's gonna bear the cost? Is it gonna be on a proportional basis as far as plumbing and electrical inspector? You know, if we're only 1/3 of the population, do we pay just 1/3 of the cost, or do we pay half the cost? Those are the things that came up. Their fee structure is different than ours. We tend to have higher fees than them. We'd have to look at that. I don't disagree.
I'd rather not get in the details.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Don't get me, I don't cut you off,
Yeah.
but we have other people who want to speak too, so we can pursue that if you'd like. But let's not get in the weeds there. Thank you. Anyone, questions from Mr. Reynolds?
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Chris Cohn.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity as well, and thank you for what you guys do. It's important. I recently sold a business that did construction-related projects across the country. Our largest customer was Hewlett-Packard. We did a lot of construction across all their facilities across the United States. As we talk about the 2018 building code, I offer a suggestion. There's a lot of things in there that can increase the cost of construction for existing and new facilities. We have the longest historical main street in Colorado that is comprised exclusively of historic facilities that are a distance between 2018 code and when they were built. I suggest perhaps that as you examine adopting 2018 code, you consider those existing structures and how do we keep them viable within the code without making the investment unfeasible for investors and developers to keep Main Street alive, as well as perhaps a working session group or a committee with our local contractors. One, are they qualified to build under 2018 code? If not, how can we help them get there? And then two, as you select those items, as I understand, you can select or deselect items from that. Perhaps looking at those from a residential construction cost and a commercial construction cost of which of those are right for our community where we are today. So we don't disable economic development both in the commercial and the residential sectors as we move forward. So that would be a suggestion. Perhaps through FEDC, we could help with that effort. And so that's just a suggestion. Second point is, if you brought up the Pueblo building code and working with the regional authority down there. We have a very active OEDIT office in Colorado with a branch at PCC in Pueblo. Perhaps this is an opportunity to ask Big Brother to help us with this process. That'd be the state through SBDC. Perhaps they can help us facilitate a look at a regional building department and bring some of those state resources to bear so it's not all on our back. And I think that's a conversation that I would volunteer to launch into if there's an interest for that. That's just a suggestion. Those are the only 2 topics that I wanted to bring forward. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Cohn? Mr. Meisner?
Thank you. I think one of the problems I see is developing that rapport to begin with, where contractors feel like that they can participate in the process. And we need to get that accomplished. And it probably starts with a few, and then those few getting a few more, so that we've got a good group of contractors that can help us make the appropriate changes. I think that's going to be really critical.
Well, keeping them viable so they can still perform the work and are qualified to perform the work in town.
Right.
And so I love the ombudsman idea. I was sitting there thinking about that, and you said that. I think that's a fantastic idea. And Ryan just exudes ombudsman. So if there's any other questions, I'll sit down and pass the mic.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Well, I like what you say, but I kind of wonder if maybe building that rapport might start with amending some of these codes with concerns that they bring to the staff. Maybe the staff can help us amend some of these codes so that we can start building that rapport.
Okay.
It's just a suggestion.
Ms. Turner?
Thank you for raising that point about our historic downtown. When Councilwoman Gonzalez and I were at the DCI conference last week, this is an issue that we heard about where, and I can't remember what city it was, but there was a city official at the conference who said that that was a problem with their downtown because it's too expensive to open a business in a historic building, and their businesses were leaving downtown to go build new construction. Was it Center? And so that's, our downtown is beautiful, and we've invested so much in our Main Street to make it beautiful. I think that's something we need to be cognizant of as we move forward, that we want it to be affordable to operate a business in these very, very old buildings. So thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Is there Mr. Paul Lund in the house? Come on down.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually Phil Lund, and I'm
Phil,
fairly-
it is Phil. I know you.
That's okay. Paul is the name that other people
Okay.
often give me as
So I
well,
was
so that
thinking,
you're not the first to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Phil Long. No.
Yeah, I've been called him too, but unfortunately I don't have anywhere near what he might
It's
have.
a lot
so.
more money, too. but
Yeah, exactly. So I'm relatively new to Canyon City. I've been here approximately 2 years coming up, and I am completely hip on this community. It is great, and I've got 2 of my children who have now moved here as well. One coming from Nebraska, the other from Michigan, and so they live here. And the reason is because their dad really likes this community. So I've been involved with the development quickly in Canyon, and I'm getting a feel and still learning what's going on. But I wanted to give you a couple specific issues that are positive, and I'm just advocating for more of that. So there's a condo conversion that we did at the corner of 2nd and Macon, and we immediately ran into problems with the Fremont Sanitation Authority. And they were going to charge us an extra $8,000 to go from an apartment to a condominium, and there was no change in anything other than title. I got a call or an email from Dina, and we appealed that, and she was going to be an advocate based on the city because that was a problem for economic development in the city. That's the kind of thing that I thought was fantastic about Canyon City and the government here. We need more of that. Tony talked about timing and speed. Anytime that I emailed Patrick in the Planning Commission, I always got a response from him within an hour. And that kind of thing was absolutely positive. We need more of that kind of thing, not less of it. The response was fantastic, and I just think that's something, as an example, that was extremely positive. Chris just got up, and Chris and I are going to be doing some business together, I think, and you're going to hear more about that in the next couple weeks. I won't get into that now. The reason I know Chris is because Dolly, your council person, at the Small Business Revolution meeting that we had at the gym, she came up to me and said, hey, I want you to meet somebody named Chris. And so Chris and I got that introduction, something we need more of as far as the networking in the community. But that happened, and it's been very positive. And again, you're going to hear more from Chris and I in the next couple of weeks about something that has taken place. The reason I'm involved with that business that is coming up, that you will hear more about it, is because Dina made the introduction between me and the person that is involved on the other side. Again, something we need more of. So there are really some positive things that are happening in Canyon City from a business perspective that are making good things. My own background is I'm from Michigan, and I led and started actually the economic development organization for my county. I used to be a county commissioner, and as a county commissioner, I was the liaison to multiple governments representing the county board of commissioners. And Michigan has this creature called townships. So we had a bunch of them in our county, and I was the liaison specifically for that. And then I ran an organization in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the second largest city, but there was 20 organizations, mostly government, that I was responsible to work with as well. And I got to learn a lot about culture and just how communities work. And I could go into some townships and you didn't want to be there. And I watched sitting in those meetings. Every time a visitor come in, it was very negative. I loved going to Maple Valley Township. They had a very positive culture as far as how things were done there. And I think just standing back and looking at business in general in Canyon City, we've got some great things going, but it really comes down to culture, the attitude, the perspective, how do we make things happen here, and it bleeds into the staff and everything else if we can get the culture going and saying this is a place to do business. And again, attending that Small Business Revolution event at the gym was fantastic. How do we take that perspective, that culture that was in there, and bleed that out into the community? And I'll tell you, there is no stopping Canyon City. It has got just fantastic resources. It has got a great city staff, and I mean that. I've met most of them at this point. And the natural resources that are here, we have got something to brag about, and I'm going to be in Canyon City the rest of my life. I absolutely love it here. So the chances are great, and again, meeting people, I consider it's a stick that's going in a fire. So you throw one stick in and it burns a little bit, and you throw another stick in and it gets going more, and a couple more in there. And from what I'm seeing, there are sticks all over the place in Canyon City that are starting to burn and creating something really good. And it's a matter of creating a culture and environment that can happen, and it bleeds into city staff and everything else. So even having a meeting like this, just extremely positive. People have a chance to voice that, but if we can set that tone, that culture in Canyon City, some really good things are going to happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Phil, right?
Phil.
Any questions of Phil?
I just want to say something really quick.
Do you have a button? Thank you. Ms. Cochran?
I just kind of wanted to make an observation, and I don't know how credible of an observation it is, but I'm finding that the people who are newer to this community are having a more positive experience, and I can't help but wonder how much of some of the issues that, Rob brought up are from people that have negative misconceptions from previous city staff or previous government, because I'd like to think that we are all pretty business friendly, at least we strive to be. And so I think it's going to be convincing the people who have these, preconception from, years ago it being difficult, that it can be a good place to do business.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself. The people that you meet and are fairly new to the community really like it and have a very positive attitude. Some of the challenges come from people who have been here for a while, and whatever their experience, they've got negative and perhaps aren't open to seeing some positive things that are happening. So, and that's going to take time.
Yeah.
Anytime you're changing culture, it does, but I've certainly noticed that myself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Cochran. Mr. Meisner?
There's another element there. The people that have been here for a while have had the opportunity to experience some of those negatives, and that's sometimes why they have that attitude. Whereas the people that just moved here have not had that opportunity. And that's the other side of that same formula.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Do a button?
No,
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
I think I do, but I'm not certain it's going to do anything. It starts beeping at me. But I've attended the housing meetings that the Regional Planning Commission has had, and something else that they talk about is just the whole issue of jobs and housing, that those are two sides to the same coin. I couldn't agree more based on my background in economic development, et cetera. Those have got to be discussed at the same time. But I was going to make a point, and I started talking about the jobs and housing, which is my favorite passion, and I apologize that I lost it. So it was about
people being here a long time, having more opportunities for negative experiences.
right, yeah, exactly. So I'm going to lose that point completely, and I apologize for doing it.
I know the feeling.
Well, we'll say that jobs and housing go together. How about that?
There you go, that works.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
All set? Thank
Nope,
you.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
We got. I'd like to wrap it up with final comments from council, and then we'll go from wherever we're going from. Would anybody else in the audience like to take a minute or two? Okay. Do you want to start, Ms. Turner, or
I'm happy to start. It doesn't matter to me.
pardon?
I said I'm happy. I can start if you'd like.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm really grateful for everyone who came today, even those who had short notice of our meeting. I think council I'm still interested in hearing more specifics about ways we can improve. And I think we have an opportunity here to make some changes that can be positive. And I think that that's our responsibility. We can't simply say, well, this complaint is a one-off, or this person's just one person and everyone else is not having problems, because I think our experience and my experience in the past year has shown that that's not the case. So we definitely have room for improvement, and I think we need to continue to engage our community and to be receptive to the things that we hear.
Thank you, Mr. Meisner.
Two things. One, I thank the contractors that had the courage to show up and voice their opinions and state some information that we needed to hear. I think the other thing is that my experience with staff has been that, not given direction, they're forced to live with the black and white, which I think that's what we expect. When they've been given some direction from administration to try to work through the weeds, it's been my experience that they've done a very good job of that. We just need to try to formulate all that attitude together, that everybody's here to get a safe building done profitably. And if we can do that, we're going to make some progress. And the solution that would help, I think, contractors is to seriously look at that regional building authority.
Ms. Smith?
And I also want to express my appreciation to each of you that came and spent your time from your busy schedules to be here today and offer us some really positive feedback and suggestions and being part of the solution. From the, I think, really helpful conversation that we had today, I do want to see something moving forward. And I think we need to schedule that work session. It probably needs to be more than just a 4 o'clock meeting in the afternoon, be a little bit more of maybe a half day or full day seminar, and invite some of these cities that are doing well and representatives from regional authorities, and so we can learn from them and they can help maybe mentor and guide us, and we can start working on these solutions. The second thing, I want to formally and officially declare that Ryan truly is the ombudsman for the businesses and contractors. He is our advocate, and we hired him specifically for that, to make doing business in Canyon City easy. And we encourage all of you to use him and suggest to others to use him. And of course, Rob Brown is also an excellent advocate as well. And I also want to give some credit to our staff. And we do have a lot of newer staff as well. And they are trying and they are working towards this, and we are a team together on this. I know I've seen Dina, you're newer to us, and I've seen some of your folders filled with notes and sticky notes sticking out everywhere of ways that you see that we can be better streamlined and more business friendly. that's on your docket, and I want to be able to make sure that we make those things happen. We want to be open for business in Canyon City.
Ms. Cochran?
Ryan, congratulations on your promotion. I would like to kind of reiterate that, I realize that there is some fear of retribution, but unless those issues are communicated to us, we can't fix them and we can't help you. So if you are having problems, reach out to us. Make it easier for us to help you. Make us aware of the issues that are going on, because I can promise you that everybody up here wants to help you succeed. So if you can reach out to us and tell us the problems that you're having, we can help. But we can't help unless we know what the issues are. So.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
Exactly, Ms. Cochran. I have, Ditto. Well, yes, but I have reached out to many contractors trying to find out what some of this commotion is that they speak about, and nobody will tell me any specifics. So, I think we as a council and our staff want to see that people who are building or developing in Canyon City, we all as a collective want to see is successful. And so it's like you said, if you don't come to us and let us know what your problems are, we can't help you fix them. But I also want to talk about learning more about our building code, because I don't know a lot about it. Maybe it's time to dissect it, much like we have been doing with our Title VIII. Not maybe to the fullest, but empower our staff to, when they see a snag, say, hey, this is an issue. Can we put this on the docket to talk about at our next meeting, so that we can make our code a little bit more user-friendly for
Sure.
our community. Because this has been a long time issue that I think we need to sit down and really take a look at. So that's what I have to say.
Okay. I sat through 2 meetings with most of you there. One of them, I acted poorly, and I'm sorry for that. I got up and got angry, and that was the old Sergeant Preston that came out. I've tried to repulse him for years. What irritated me was, in this particular case, without mentioning names, the third party, which represents Canyon City, us, has 7 redrawings, and we really didn't know about that. At least I was told we didn't. That's wrong. Will has a pole barn. A pole barn. How many times have you gone back there? It's a pole barn. Let's approve it. Let's get going. I'm not crazy about the third party. I think we need to look at another one. I'm just not. That's what irritated me. We have someone functioning for the city that has, I think, a financial well-being to maybe not prove things right away. Get mad at me, but I think that way. I think we need to change that. I also agree with what you said. We went through an agonizing time and some fun involved when we redid Title VIII. Think of what we did the other night, all those changes that we did. I think we can do it with the building code. I think we should. You can't convince me that you don't want to make your life easier when you're going out and doing stuff. And I think we can make that easier. We can make it more understanding. You've done it with our codes in great fashion. I appreciate all that time. I think we should do it with the codes too. That would be a primer and a good step to get to, if you want to go to 2018, to do that. I also think we should have, call it a Blue Ribbon Committee or whatever, to get together and let's talk about that. Maybe some of those people, maybe council should be selected to visit other towns. Let's face it, we visited other towns to look for the recreation, or not yet, but recreation facilities and things like that. Let's do it for this. This is a big portion. I've been here over 40 years, and for a great deal of time, this has been a continuous concern. There's 2 sides to every story, and I think we need to keep this on top burner along with some other things. So A, I suggest that this is a smart bunch. I think we all need to have a work session, determine like we did with stormwater. I got to tell you, I was very impressed with those people that came together with stormwater. We couldn't have paid for the expertise on that. Think of the engineers and people that they're retired and they spent their time with stormwater. I think we came up with a good conclusion. I think we should do that with our building and our codes and things like that, especially that's a sore spot. And let's cure it that way. Oftentimes, I was always told when I was a kid that don't ever mess with Mr. Lebo. He's a bad guy. And finally, I was thrown in a situation where I had to be with Mr. Lebo. He really wasn't a bad guy, really. I think sometimes we get that out there, and we can change that. So A, I believe we should look at a blue ribbon panel, which we select to put in there. I think those people should maybe travel to Pueblo or wherever. Let's select that, try that, and let's just make it easier. And I think we should approve his pole barn. That's it.
Well, I already wrote everybody's name in the audience down. I think we have a good start to our gold.
I believe that
Yeah.
there came together, especially with stormwater, that I believe was an outstanding group of people. I sat back there and looked at the qualifications, and those were volunteers. We couldn't have paid those people, and they came here because they love the town, like Phil does, like we all do. And I believe that's out there. So, Mr. Meisner.
I think one of the things that I see from my simplistic mind is, can we differentiate between these structures that house people versus structures that don't? Some of the most recent problems that we've had is some of those structures that are not housing people, that we're having these stringent requirements on, that seems to cause a problem. And again, I'm not an engineer or to be able to classify that, but it seems like we ought to be able to distinguish between residential, commercial, and in that commercial segment, a building that houses and does not house bodies.
Well, is there a comparison here that when we did the 2A, when we had a company that had their own engineers and everything bid it, and then, what was that? That's design, build, bid, or something? I get those mixed up. I mean, you got someone here, Will, for instance. Exactly what he said. He's with the pole barn. There's a distinction there in my mind. However, if you make the insistence that we have to have the engineers and all this other stuff and all the architecture and the specs and the numbers and the yada, 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 I think people are just not going to do it. I'd have to think twice if I did it. There's a distinction. You can't broad brush and paint everybody the same. We're not building a journey home. Those people, they do that all the time. I would expect them to do it right. I would expect Will to get a pole barn, to put his Jeeps in there without a lot of hassle. I just could be wrong. That's the way it is. So I think we should have that panel. That's my vote. I'm seriously about looking at another couple of other people that do plan reviews. And I also would like Will to have his building permit. So, any questions? Okay, we're adjourned.